Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Negroponte. I really appreciate that introduction, and thank you to Ambassador Trani, Chuck Alsup, my friend, and the rest of the Intelligence and National Security Alliance for inviting me here tonight. I'm really honored to be here, and I want to commend INSA for really amazing leadership in bringing together an impressive group of government professionals, private sector professionals, and academic experts. So I know that INSA has its roots in the Security Affairs Support Association, and that used to consist primarily of NSA employees. And as you know from what Ambassador Negroponte just said, I used to work at NSA, so I feel quite at home among INSA. I must say that although I haven't had a chance to actually have any food yet, it looks like it's better than the NSA cafeteria by a fair bit. Although I have to say I had really missed the way my favorite NSA cafeteria worker used to always call me Hun. I thought that was one of my favorite parts about working there. I'm also actually, very pleased to be here with my colleagues, Andy McCabe and Karen Wagner and Commissioner Davis for this panel after dinner. When I saw that lineup, I have to say I thought maybe my staff had mixed this up with a congressional hearing, given that lineup. But I'm much happier to be here. And as I noted, and it seems like INSA really is going to make me work for this dinner. So if you wouldn't mind just leaving my salad there that I haven't had a chance, that would be great. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the challenges that we face at NCTC and really across the counterterrorism community when it comes to intelligence and technology. And I want to focus my comments on technology. In short, I would put the challenge like this. Given that we face a diverse and complex and evolving threat, and I'm going to talk about that threat, given that threat, how do we make sure that we are collecting and exploiting the relevant information and the massive amounts of relevant information that is available to us to stop the next attack? And in thinking about this challenge, really a technological challenge, I have to admit that my own experience with technology is a somewhat mixed one. And the pivotal moment in that relationship came about 6 years ago when my daughter Elizabeth was 14 years old. She wanted to have her own MySpace page, as she told me at the time. It shows how long ago it was. She wanted MySpace. Apparently all of her friends had it. She was going to be left out. She had to have it. And at the time I was a prosecutor at DOJ, so I sat her down and soberly went through with her the reasons that I was concerned about the dangers of being online, the perils of putting your information out online. And I thought that she had listened to me until one night I was on our computer, and she was only 14. She hadn't learned how to cover her tracks. And I noticed that despite my direction to the contrary, she had signed up for MySpace. Yeah. So I sat her down that night, full of righteous parental indignation, and I explained to her, you have really disappointed me. You've signed up contrary to my explicit direction. And in fact, the exact problem that I was so concerned about, the exact problems that I had told you about was apparent because I had seen that some creepy 20-something-year-old man had become her first friend. And this was exactly the problem. This guy had become her first friend, some stranger. And she looked at me, as only a teenage girl can do, and she rolled her eyes, and she said, "Dad, that's Tom Anderson. He founded MySpace. He's everybody's first friend." So, needless to say, my legs were completely cut from underneath me. I lost the moral high ground. I lost the technological high ground. I've never regained either of those, at home anyway. So let me shift gears and talk about work, where I'm much more comfortable and on more sure footing. Outside the entrance to NCTC, surrounding our flagpole, there are 5 puzzle pieces inset in the stones, symbolizing, I think, the difficult task, the difficult analytic task before the entire counterterrorism community. And every day we walk past these puzzle pieces as we come into our building, and then we see the 9/11 memorial, which includes hunks of twisted metal from the iconic buildings. It was commissioned by my predecessor, Mike Leiter, and it serves as a stark reminder of what happens if we're not able to piece these puzzles together. I do think that this puzzle piece in front of our building is a good analogy for what we do every day at NCTC. So as you all know, in the intelligence world, it's not the case that one or two or even 5 pieces of information complete that puzzle. We are often looking for more pieces. We're often looking for pieces that determine what's relevant, what's credible, what's not relevant. And what really complicates things for us is that those pieces are mixed in with a pile of potentially unrelated pieces of information, human intelligence, signals intelligence, open source intelligence, that may or may not relate to the threat streams we're tracking. And at NCTC, we literally receive thousands of intelligence reports every day relating to counterterrorism that we have to sort through. And then there are also, of course, critical pieces of information that we'll never get, pieces of the puzzle we don't have and we're not going to get despite our best effort, and those unknowables are growing. So putting together this puzzle, identifying the disparate pieces of information that are relevant and that relate to each other, that are credible, this is our essential job. And to do this, we have to have 2 things. We have to have that information, we have to have the right information, and secondly, we have to have the tools, the right tools, to analyze and correlate that information. So as you think about the puzzle now, I want to talk about the puzzle pieces that we're following in terms of the threats for a few minutes, because every conversation I have about what we're doing, I want to really lay the foundation by talking about how we see the threat from NCTC's perspective. And some of this will be quite familiar to many of you. The threat looks very different today from the way it looked certainly 10 and really even 4 years ago. The death of bin Laden and so many of his main lieutenants have put the core of al-Qaeda on the path to defeat. And at the same time, the threats that we face from al-Qaeda and those inspired by al-Qaeda are persistent, and they are increasingly complex. As al-Qaeda's senior leaders and the Fatah struggle to survive, really struggle to remain relevant, the group has turned quite purposefully to a diverse set of affiliates and loosely organized adherents to carry out attacks and to advance its ideology. And these groups and extremists are spread out geographically across large swaths of the Middle East and North Africa. And the terrorists we track have demonstrated that they are committed and that they are adaptive in the tactics they use. So let me give you a little bit more details as I walk through this. In South Asia, our campaign, our consistent pressure has really decimated the ranks of AQ's senior leadership. We have constrained their ability to recruit, to travel, really even to communicate with each other. And so while they retain the intent to strike the United States, whether that's here at home or abroad, their ability to carry out a complex attack has been greatly diminished. At the same time, al-Qaeda senior leadership remains the ideological vanguard of a global movement. And that movement is growing in both complexity and in terms of its geographic spread. Al-Qaeda can look to several affiliated groups. These include AQAP in Yemen, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, Al-Shabaab, Al-Nusra in Syria. In particular, Al-Qaeda in Iraq has recast itself as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, and is a sign of its regional ambitions, as well as, at the same time, picking up the pace of its attack to a rate we haven't seen in a number of years. Al-Shabaab has demonstrated a persistent capability to carry out attacks in Somalia and in East Africa, with the attack at the Westgate Mall in Nairobi providing a really stark example of that group's resilience. And then AQAP remains the group that we think is the most dedicated to carrying out an attack against us here at home, while at the same time conducting a barrage of attacks particularly in Sana'a and around Yemen. And in fact, 3 times in the past few years, the group has tried to take down an airliner bound for the United States. So beyond these affiliates, beyond these official affiliates, loose groups, loose networks of extremists and individuals who are aligned with al-Qaeda's ideology threaten our people and our interests. These tend to be multifaceted, sometimes blurring the lines between a terrorist group or an insurgent group and even criminal gangs. So it's a diverse threat. Now, looking at the map, unrest and instability, especially in the Middle East and in North Africa, have allowed terrorist groups and networks of extremists to find footholds and to gain ground. As Peter Bergen recently noted in a piece, al-Qaeda-inspired groups have expanded their geographic presence in the Arab world to unprecedented levels. Across vast expanses of territory, again, where some of you may have business interests and business ventures, terrorist groups and individual adherents are taking full advantage of the permissive security environments that exist as a result of power vacuums in Africa and the Levant, particularly in places where they have easy access to weapons, and where borders are porous. And there's no better example of this than the attack against our diplomatic mission over a year ago in Benghazi, a terrorist attack perpetrated by extremists in eastern Libya with various affiliations with local militia groups and those who are sympathetic to al-Qaeda. And then as we witnessed in Boston, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, later, the threat of terrorism can reach us here at home, where radicalized individuals, really just inspired by al-Qaeda's message, can use simple tactics and evade detection to wreak havoc against innocent victims. As the President observed last spring, today a person can consume hateful propaganda, commit themselves to a violent agenda, and learn how to kill without leaving their home. So in short, as my friends Andy Liepman and Philip Mudd wrote recently, al-Qaeda is morphing into a new, more dispersed, less predictable, but still lethal enemy. So at the same time that this threat is becoming more diverse and more widespread geographically, these groups and individuals that we monitor are also adapting, and they're showing increased agility and sophistication. For example, terrorist groups have enhanced their communication and their outreach efforts, leveraging social media to highlight everything from their battlefield successes to their humanitarian efforts. AQAP has published, as you guys know, a dozen or so editions of its extremist magazine, Inspire. AQAP praised the Boston bombings, blessing the attack, calling the Tsarnaevs, quote, two great brothers. And then al-Shabaab has its own Twitter account where it touted the group's role in the attacks at the Westgate Mall. So we also know that in the face of our pressure, AQ has adopted by becoming more decentralized. It has modified its tactics, looking to conduct simpler attacks that don't require the same degree of command and control, a centralized command and control. And in its Inspire magazine, AQAP has urged extremists to carry out, quote, lone jihad, acts of terrorism that are likely to evade our tripwires. And then beyond this, we are seeing AQ adapt by turning to more stringent security measures, particularly in the ways that they communicate. And this, of course, makes it harder for us to conduct surveillance and to identify and disrupt plots before they occur. Now, this problem has only gotten worse. The recent disclosures have not only confirmed what some terrorist groups had suspected, that we had the ability to monitor some communication nodes, but it also gave them insight into the scope and into the scale of our capabilities. As a result of the repeated disclosure over the past several months of intelligence sources and methods, terrorists have changed their communication methods, in some cases discussing why they should move their conversations to another forum, and in other cases just dropping out of our collection altogether. This is not an exaggeration, this is the fact. So that's the threat picture. Now, to combat these threats, and I'm going to move back to the technology point a bit, we need information. At NCTC, getting this information, getting the right pieces of the puzzle, means for us relying on all of our partners. These are our partners within the intelligence community, represented by many of you here, at the state and local level, and from very capable foreign services around the world. We at NCTC, we're not collectors in the first instance, but we do have a unique mandate, and that mandate is to pull together and integrate all intelligence, whether that intelligence was collected overseas and whether it was collected inside the United States, all intelligence relating to terrorism. So we look to intelligence from human sources, particularly from the FBI and from CIA, often collected under extraordinarily dangerous circumstances. We also depend on the full range of signals intelligence collection, primarily from NSA. No organization like it in the world. The fact is, terrorists use our communications infrastructure to radicalize others, to recruit operatives, and to plot attacks. Our security depends on NSA's ability to conduct surveillance on these targets. And we rely increasingly on open sources of foreign information, including social media, that can often provide real-time insights into breaking events. Now let me take a moment to talk about my colleagues at NSA. The NSA workforce is a national treasure. It is made up of an extraordinarily talented, dedicated, and conscientious group of professionals. The engineers and the mathematicians and the analysts at NSA work around the clock to keep us all safe. And they are guided by the spirit and they adhere to the letter of the law. And I am extremely proud of the opportunity I had to serve as their lawyer, and I'm prouder still of the work that I see every day that they continue to do to protect our country. And in the course of the ongoing debate that we are having about surveillance, I think that we all appreciate the words of the President's review group, that our national security, quote, depends on the continued capacity of NSA to collect essential information. So from my counterterrorism perspective, from my perspective at NCTC, I want NSA, I want FBI, CIA, DHS, all of our partners to continue to gather this information to keep collecting intelligence. Now, turning from the information to the tools. For NCTC, our challenge, and something that we're very focused on, comes from once we obtain this information, once the operational agencies that I just mentioned collect that information and share it with us. We then have the daunting task of culling through that data, analyzing and piecing together the puzzles, finding the signal in the noise. This requires sophisticated, integrated data management solutions, something we've been working on really since our creation just about a decade ago. We're about to hit our 10-year anniversary. You know, from the outset, we recognized the power of integrating our information and integrating the terrorism databases that we have access to. To do this, we developed a couple years ago the Counterterrorism Data Layer, or CTDL for short. And this is really a system of systems that empowers our analysts to search, correlate, and conduct sophisticated link analysis using tools that reach into our stores of terrorism data. And every day, we rely on the CTDL to follow up on leads, to map terrorist networks, to uncover information about suspicious individuals and plots. And that's actually an important point. There is always a starting place for our analysts. We're searching for information in this data because we've collected a tip, there's been some piece of pocket litter, or there's been some fragment of information that then forms the basis for our searches. Now let me give you a few concrete examples of how we're using our data. First, a program we call Kingfisher. We are now part of the system run by the Department of State that helps identify applicants for visas, to come to this country, to travel to this country. And we do this by looking for their connection, potential connection to terrorism. Last year, NCTC began exploiting the data we have to examine every one of the 11 million visa applications that come into this country each year in order to identify any connections to terrorism. So now, in a matter of only a few minutes, what used to take days or weeks, we are able to compare data from the applicant to our classified holdings and identify potential terrorist ties. And in doing so, along with the Department of State, we have reduced by nearly 80% the number of applicants who require additional review. And this has helped save tens of millions of dollars annually, and all the while improve the speed, efficiency, and accuracy of the visa vetting system. Another way we're using our data to help identify individuals is by looking for individuals who have traveled to or from Syria. We know, and you all know only too well, that thousands of foreign fighters are traveling to Syria to engage in the uprising and the unrest there, and many have joined extremist groups. They have received training, they have become further radicalized, and obtained access to weapons there. Hundreds of these individuals are from Western countries, including countries in Europe, and that also includes dozens from the United States. They will pose a threat when they return from Syria to their home countries. Using our unique access to data, both foreign and domestic, we are working with the FBI, with the CIA, with the entire intelligence community to identify these potential extremists. So remember those puzzle pieces mixed in with thousands of other puzzle pieces. That's the challenge we're facing with the number of people traveling to Syria to join in the fight there. And then finally, a final example, at NCTC, we've pulled together some of our best analysts to create pursuit teams. Their mission is to take the latest threat reports and to really look for tactical connections, to comb through the intelligence information and data we have obtained to look for new and sometimes really non-obvious leads. For example, they use our access to reporting and other databases to find other members of terrorist cells, travel patterns, even phone numbers. And then their responsibility is to share those leads with operational agencies like the FBI, like CIA, for follow-up. And this simply wouldn't be possible without our access, one, and two, our ability to exploit that information using sophisticated analytic tools. So with this access to information, I should say that we have, and we take seriously our commitment to ensure the protection of that data. For one, we operate on a closed system with restricted access. Only specific users with a demonstrated need to know can have access to this sensitive information, and that access is logged and audited. We're also subject to oversight by the executive branch, by Congress, and everyone, myself included, has taken hours and hours of training to ensure that we understand the rules and policies that are designed to protect privacy and civil liberties. And in short, we have a range of measures and sophisticated processes, including some innovative technological solution to safeguard data and to protect the privacy and civil liberties of Americans. Now let me turn in the last few minutes to talk about just a couple of the challenges that we face going forward. I mean, first, just from a very practical fiscal perspective, we have to be smart about what we are doing when we seek to obtain access to information. The federal government is tightening its belts, the intelligence community is no exception, and IT investments are not cheap. Ingesting data into our counterterrorism data layer that I talked about is expensive, and that doesn't really even include maintenance costs. And even if the data contains terrorism information, we still ask ourselves that cost-benefit question, are there more cost-effective ways of accessing that data that will meet our mission needs? We have an inherent incentive to be smart about the data sets that we actually access. The more data we have, the more potential distraction, the more noise we introduce into the system. That makes it harder for us to determine which pieces of that puzzle go together. Another challenge, obviously very much in the news, is promoting transparency. We do need to be more open about what we're doing when we can be. On our own initiative, NCTC posted information on our website, nctc.gov, about the guidelines that we've recently adopted for handling data. We've engaged with civil liberties and privacy groups and with faith-based community groups to explain what we're doing with this data and why. And I welcome this dialogue. I think it's healthy. Fundamentally, while much of our work is secret, and it has to be, our responsibility is to perform our mission on behalf of the American people, and we have to remember that. We recognize that we must always, every day, earn the trust and confidence of the American public, and we do this by demonstrating that we adhere to the rule of law and we adhere to our founding values in how we handle sensitive information and in all aspects of our work. So, for you, where do you come in, particularly those of you in industry and in academia? So I would say keep focusing on this problem of big data and how we can increase our ability to exploit the data. That problem will be with us for the foreseeable future. Look at ways for us to speed correlations, to conduct queries of large amounts of data, to tag data with appropriate metadata, and then provide access for cleared individuals to make sure that we're able to protect it. And continue to develop privacy-enhancing technologies, such as anonymization and masking, to further enhance the protection of data. And as we strive for more transparency, a second challenge is that we have to come to a compromise, something short of declassifying everything. We still need to be able to keep secrets to do our job. But we need to continue to build trust in our system of checks and balances and in the oversight mechanisms that have been developed over years and decades. How can we enhance transparency and oversight in a manner that still allows us to accomplish our mission? This is an enduring question. So, thinking back to this morning, my daily routine starts every day with about an hour of briefings about current terrorist threats. This morning we covered a little over 40 different pieces of reports, of threat information. And as I got up from the briefing, I knew that our people, along with their colleagues really across the intelligence community, were already working on piecing together that puzzle to detect and disrupt potential attacks. And so ever since my MySpace incident with my daughter, she has had little respect for my technological capability. But I do know one thing, and that is the power of information and technology combined with a dedicated workforce. And I see that, I'm proud to tell you, every day at NCTC, and I'm really proud to be part of that. So thank you again for inviting me here tonight. I look forward to participating in your panel and answering your questions. Thank you very much.